My parents like gave me this box of 45s that was my grandparents' records, and the record that I pulled out of that box that blew my mind was Lefty Frizzell, Always Late with Your Kisses, and I played the shit out of that record. I was like, man, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. But the other two records out of that box that I also really liked were Kathy's Clown by the Everly Brothers and Downtown by Petula Clark. So, It was a wide variety of stuff, but and in that box was some Hank Snow records and some other country stuff. But man, it was that Lefty Frizzell thing that just drove me wild. And ever since then, my parents were big flea market people. So we went to flea markets pretty much every weekend. And then I cut grass and, watched people's dogs and stuff like that. So I always had money. And so this would have been in the early mid 80s, when CDs were just starting to come out. And people were dumping off vinyl records, seriously, albums for 10 cents and a quarter. And so with $5, man, I could come home with stacks of shit. And so it was fair. Anything was fair game. And I just started bringing all this stuff home. And then when I met Bill, it just amplified that because he would say oh, well, this person wrote this song and you should find records by this person. And then it just became this whole new hunt because I had this whole new level of knowledge or access to this level of knowledge that I had never had before. And I mean, we would stay up all night, listening to records because he wasn't going to go anywhere. And so I would basically pick him up. We would run around for a while, go home, listen to records, and then I would, drop him off, take him home. And he would just spill knowledge and my gospel, bluegrass, country, and, he grew up in that AM radio era. And, he had this, he had one of those radios that also has the shortwave on it, one of those real nice fine tuner radios. And that dude, he would sit there with his radio. This was before XM radio and all, satellite radio. And he would sit there in his apartment, which was funny because they had no light bulbs in their lights because they didn't need them, which was, I would go over to his house and there was no lights. And I'm like, Bill, you have no lights. And they're like, well, we don't need them. And I was like, no, well, that makes sense. And so he had this little radio that he would sit in his recliner and every night he would pull in, WSM out of Nashville, 650 AM. And there's a guy that he's the voice of the Grand Ole Opry now, this guy named Eddie Stubbs. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. But
I don't think so. I don't know.
So Eddie Stubbs was in this band called the Johnson Mountain Boys, and they were a very traditionally minded bluegrass band in the 80s and the 90s called the Johnson Mountain Boys, and they were out of the Baltimore area. And Eddie Stubbs was the fiddle player, and he moves to Nashville, and he gets a job on WSM radio, and his shift was from 8 to midnight on weeknights, and that dude played the best classic country stuff. And Bill would call in and talk to him all the time, and Eddie would share his knowledge with Bill, and they would talk about these obscure things, and then and Bill would tell me, he's like, oh, I talked to Eddie last night, blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh, Bill, you're full of shit, And then one night I'm listening to it, and Eddie Stubbs was like, I'm going to play this next song for my friend Bill up in Cleveland, Ohio. And, sure enough, he was talking about Blind Bill is what I called him, and this obscure Skeets McDonald tune with Johnny Paycheck singing harmony. And I called Bill up. I was like, damn, man, that's cool. And so, I mean, it's just that kind of stuff is what got me into it. And then meeting people like that and sharing that knowledge was really the thing that, kind of pulled it together for me. And I've always collected more albums than singles. And I think that's what's going to be interesting about what we're going to do is to me, it was just convenience. And, I always thought more bang for your buck too. You get all these songs instead of just 2 songs or whatever. So, it was a good time to collect records because they were super cheap back then.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I mean, country records are still pretty cheap, but I've heard from a lot of other collectors, it's oh yeah, in when CDs were first coming out in the 70s and 80s and stuff, records were basically being just thrown away, good records. It
was insane, literally. I mean, I would buy records for 10 for $1.
That's crazy, man.
Albums, 10 for $1, yeah. I mean, one of the first records I remember ever bringing home in a stack was Neil Young After the Gold Rush. And I couldn't believe it that I could get something that cool, that cheap, And it's I didn't get into albums and records because I thought they were a superior format. I just was a kid with no money, and like I liked the album, I liked the cover art. I mean, you see like Porter Wagner's like The Rubber Room or, you know, Cold Hard Facts of Life album covers, and you're like, yeah, that's pretty cool, you know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, definitely things have changed, but country still is relatively cheap out there. I can still find a lot of country albums for $1 these days.
Yeah, country records are still pretty cheap, which is nice. I mean, it's still not, it's for being a really familiar music form to almost anybody in America, it's like a pretty undervalued music form.
Well, yeah, I guess there's a lot of preconceived notions about what it is. And like, I mean, I think it's cool that there's like a younger generation, like you guys and Tebbs and Corey Grinder and, you know, other people that are like, you know, kind of finding it. And, you know, you may get into it for some ironic reasons or whatever to start with. And then you figure out like, hey, this is like pretty amazing stuff. And, you know, and it can be pretty amazingly horrible too. I mean, like as evidenced by a lot of the, you know, the records you find are like, you know, some of them are in that category. They're so bad, they're cool. You know what I mean? Like you just like, you wonder like somebody paid good money to go into a recording studio and like do this, you know?
Yeah, I know. I really wish I could find out like what it was like back in the day to work at a recording studio and like have like just somebody come in off the street basically and just like record a song. Cause there's so many 45s that are just like seemingly some local guy who wrote 2 songs and just came in and, you know, the band played behind him and he sang his songs and left. Like, I wonder what that was like dealing with those project. People. Yeah. I mean, I assume most studios back in the day had a thing where it was like, you know, $75 and we record your 2 songs and, you know, you get 145s or whatever. It was so cheap back then.
Yeah. And we'll put a basic studio band behind you and, come in and, you know, record your song. Yeah,
that's it. I mean, especially the way that like, backing bands were used back then. It's like, you don't even have to have a band. You just have to like, you don't even need to know how to play guitar, really. You just come in and sing.
Well, there used to be, do you ever go through those magazines, those old ones I call Country Song Roundup and stuff like that?
No, I've gone through like the old like Nashville yearbooks. You seen those?
Yeah, and a lot of those magazines, they would put ads that say like, do you write poetry? And then it says like, you know, we'll put your song to music. And that's how they roped people in. Like exactly what you're saying is like, hey, I don't even know how to play guitar, but I think this is a good idea for a song. And then, yeah, they would like just put your, you know, you could send them lyrics and they would like put it to music for you. I mean, it's only 2 or 3 chords. So,
right.
You know, not like a big deal.
Yeah.
Again on Refugee Road with smoke coming out of the hood. And the man at the station says I might be broke down for good. The car was high and so was I, between the smoke and the shine and the pills. I put my thumb out on Route 33 for a ride through the Hawking Hills. And I get tired of these hard times, paying the travelers due. I'm gonna settle down in a southern town with the old new Straitsville blues. Well, I circled back to Circleville to find me a girl or two. One of them wouldn't jump out of the fire and I knew what I had to do. Yes, I put my knee down on the frozen ground and I stole that girl from town. Nobody cares to see my face when I come back around. I get tired of these hard times, paying the travelers dues. I'm gonna settle down in a southern town with the old new Straitsville blues. many miles behind me? How many more to go? Last night somebody offered the jug. I said, no, son, I've had enough. I've had enough of these hard times, paying the travelers due. I'm gonna settle down in a southern town with old New Straitsville blues. Yes, I've had enough of these hard times, paying the travelers dues. I'm gonna settle down in a southern town with the old New Straitsville, old New Straitsville blues.
So obviously, your life is like pretty vinyl centric now, considering your job is cutting lacquers.
Yeah.
Do you feel that vinyl is a superior media now?
You know what? I like it for a lot of reasons. I mean, I'm not going to ever argue that I think it's like sonically perfect or anything like that. I think there's a dimension to it that can't be duplicated in digital. It's definitely a format with its limitations, and that's the thing that I've learned the most from cutting lacquers is like, I think the reason a lot of people like vinyl is because of a lot of those limitations. Like the warmth is sometimes because the top end needs to be rounded off due to the cutting gear, and like, you know, the stereo image has to be a certain way for it to like track correctly with a playback stylus and stuff like that. So yeah, it is what it is. To me, it's just more fun. I mean, I'd rather look at the artwork, and I'd rather be able to read the lyrics and the liner notes and read where it was recorded. And, you know, a CD or a cassette, like, it doesn't have that, you know? I mean,
right.
Or, I mean, at my age, too, if I open up a cassette J card, I can't read it.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely I don't really have a stance on, like, as far as what media is better. Like, a really good, like, vinyl sounds better to me, but I really enjoy having, like, big art and, like, sitting and looking at the package. That's definitely a big part.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tactile thing too. Like, I mean, I like to interact with things. I like to touch things. I like gear, you know, I like turntables, and it's like, it's a whole experience just beyond pushing play and like listening to a file, you know, and to me, that's the fun of it. And the joke I always make with people on, the vinyl thing is like, well, you always need a place to roll a doobie too. And it's like a record jacket is way better than, than your iPhone. So,
yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it's the tactile nature of it too. That's really the, to me, that's the fun part.
Yeah. How did you originally get into cutting lacquers? I know you've told me before.
Oh, I worked at the Beachland, and then one day I was hauling beer down in the basement, and Vince Slazars, who owns Got a Groove, had put a bunch of advertising cards up on the wall, and I was hauling beer down, and I saw that, and I was like, well, I'm kind of sick of working late nights and running sound and all that. I grabbed the card, and I talked to Vince, and he invited me on a trip to go see a disc cutting machine out at Suma Recording, which is out in Painesville, Ohio. And Vince offered the guy out there the work that I do now, and the guy turned him down. And I came home and I told Bonnie the whole story, and she was like, oh, you should you should do that and find one of those machines. And it started a whole year and a half long process of finding a cutting lathe. And once I bought it, I brought it home and taught myself how to use it. And, 10 years later, here we are. Still doing it. And it was just a nice extension of everything else I had done in my life. And the partnership with Got a Groove was really crucial because they told me if I learned how to do it, that they would basically give me all this work. And so I kind of had a guaranteed income stream. The day that I felt I was ready to go, I had a job. So that really helped convince, I talked Bonnie into loan me some money and my dad, and they helped me get it off the ground. And but knowing that I had this kind